Hello, you're watching news from Kazakhstan. It is Thursday, January 24th. These are the headlines. Where did the $10 billion go? President Nazarbayev claims that no one has seen the national fund money allocated to fight the crisis. Activists hold campaigns in support of convicted politician Vladimir Kozlov, who has spent a full year behind bars. ArcelorMittal miners sue their employer. Laborers demand to include payment of annual bonuses in contracts. $10 billion allocated on anti-crisis programs gone. President Nazarbayev has literally dumbfounded the public with this statement at the extended government session. Here are his words.
It is easy to spend the assets from the National Fund. $10 billion allocated to reduce the crisis are nowhere to be seen. They disappeared, and who is to blame? Everyone kept promising to have these funds returned. Yet the president didn't explain where did these billions go and who should be held liable for this. He only stated that from now on, the money of the National Fund will be allocated only in case of the complex situation. In fact, the national leader complimented the work of the former Prime Minister Karim Masimov despite the major economic downfall, which occurred exactly during his term in the office, whereas inactivity of the pension and insurance sectors have outraged the president. There are over $5.3 billion sitting dormant. Why are these funds not being used? Let's use them, and then we will think about what's next, said the president. He suggested establishing a single fund in the country, handing over the accounts of all private pension funds to him. Moreover, the country needs a single grain holding and the National Agency for Economic Development. There were several significant statements made in Akorda on Wednesday, one of them regarding the construction of nuclear power plant. It is time to act, said the president. In fact, the officials should refrain from constantly referring to a new strategy of 2050. The Minister of Finances, Bolat Zhamyshev, heard it from the president as well.
В настоящее время Минфин сдает в аренду 240 тысяч квадратных метров помещений.
The Ministry of Finances is currently leasing 240,000 square meters of space, while the country is short of kindergartens and schools, construction of which we spent money for. The government and the parliament have moved from Almaty. What happened to the buildings? Zhamyshev, I'm asking you, did you even bother to figure out who raided them? Just sit down, no need to explain.
Ладно, садись, что будешь объяснять?
Miners sue ArcelorMittal. The Korgao Coal Miners Labor Union demands to add a so-called 13th salary to the collective bargaining agreement. At the moment, only metal makers have that clause in the contract, and even they were not given the premiums due to an unfulfilled plan for the year 2012.
The Korgao trade union representatives state they attempted a prejudicial dispute resolution, but the company management refused to make any advances. The first trial session of the case took place today in the specialized economic court. However, the ArcelorMittal company representatives claim they have never received an official summons. Meanwhile, another regional court trial is scheduled for Thursday. It will be devoted to the oilers' complaints against the employer and trade union. The disabled oilmen state that the collective agreement contains a clause discriminating their rights. Meanwhile, the trade union intends to protect the ex-workers' interests, fails to fulfill its primary obligations. All the agreement terms and conditions are the result of mutual parties' deliberation. The clause discriminating a whole segment to the company's employees means that the trade union neglected responsibility and failed to protect the workers' interests in due order. This led us to believe the trade union has financial benefits from the lobbying the employer's interests.
The Karaganda Region Department of Internal Policy has shut down the newspaper Kazakstanskaya Gazeta without a trial. Officials referred to the ministry that voided the publication's license in their decision. Rights activists are outraged at such an attitude towards the law, which can only be explained as revolutionary expedience. We turn to the next report for details.
Chief editor of the newspaper Kazakstanskaya Gazeta Bereg Zhagiparov is shocked by the decision of local city administration to terminate the media license without any valid reasons provided. The newspaper Kazakstanskaya Gazeta license number 10994G Karaganda region is to be removed from the state register and an electronic database according to the order number 8 on the print media and news agencies dated from January 17, 2013 of the Ministry of Information under Article 13 paragraph 1 of the Mass Media Law. Article 13 of the law on mass media, which officials refer to, involves the media shutdown only by a court decision or the owner's request. Berik Zhagiparov, both the owner and chief editor of the newspaper, can't figure out what triggered this decision, as he neither received any claims nor wanted to shut down the media himself. The representative of the city administration proposes to go to court once we oppose the current decision. However, we didn't break the law and thus not going to give up publishing the newspaper, and we'll see what their next step will be. Media rights activist Tamara Kaleva is really concerned about the case, as city officials have no legal power to shut down the media. In her opinion, Kazakhstanskaya Gazeta has been terminated after publishing harsh articles on Kazakh leaders as well as officials. It is a blatant violation of mass media law, as the Ministry of Information has no legal power to shut down the newspaper. Thus, like in all previous cases, officials' actions can be only explained as revolutionary expediency. Adelsos Foundation added the case of the Kazakhstanskaya Gazeta to their list of violations, which is rapidly enlarged in recent months, including Gulzhan.org websites blocked for 3 months by a court, 8 newspapers prohibited on a mass scale, 23 online resources under the common title Respublika, the newspaper Vzгляд, K+ channel and KplusTV website.
The rampancy of corruption in the regions is directly related to the highest echelons of power, announced former presidential candidate Salim Oten at a press conference on Wednesday. He demonstrated the hierarchy of corruption on the example of 2 Aktobe residents who paid a visit to the capital to speak about their former employer's graft.
Residents of Aktobe Nagmetbay Yermakhanov and Aldebergen Aitmagambetov arrived to the capital to tell public about the rampant corruption in the western region that is beyond limits. One of them revealed the corruption schemes of the local bus depot, while another one revealed the same within Kazakhstan Railways Department. Both men were deprived of months of wages and fired for their honesty. All the complaints addressed to the law enforcement and judicial authorities were unsuccessful. Both of them insist that corrupted authorities are to blame for everything. Of course, we cannot back it up with facts, yet the entire Aktobe region knows that Yemshan company belongs to Sagandyk. Therefore, it allows them to get away with anything, for instance, the traffic incident claiming woman's life or depriving people from their salaries. They are covered by the prosecutor's office, financial police departments, investigators and all the law enforcement agencies. The ex-presidential candidate Salim Oten decided to intercede for his countrymen. He used to work for the government himself and knows firsthand about the lack of jurisdiction of the officials, especially those associated with high authorities. The politician is convinced that each government official owns a business in the region. In fact, he even provides specific examples. Every authority's representative certainly has an additional source of income somewhere. For instance, when Musin arrives to Atrau region, each deputy mayor of the region, each prosecutor of the region and the city, the presiding judge of the regional and the city courts had its own oil well. Their wells would produce a low-quality gasoline and diesel fuel, which is sold in a gas station by state set price. In fact, they also own these gas stations. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection admitted that an issue of employers in arrears is critical. There are about 100 enterprises with over $6.6 million of multi-month wage payable. According to the data revealed through special monitoring by the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, there are 92 enterprises that exceed 3 months delays on wages payable. At the end of the last year, the amount due equals to $7.2 million. The visitors from Aktobe are hoping to convey the message to the president through the media. They believe he will certainly take measures. Otherwise, both men are willing to take extreme measures themselves, including hunger strikes or even a suicide.
Residents of a Kazil village house have been in distress for 15 years. 87 families received apartments here in the late 90s and have been living without gas, heating and water ever since. Our correspondents attempted to find out if local residents have any hope for survival.
The first occupants of the State Farm Technical College dormitory moved back in the late 90s. Some of them received the communal housing warrants from the city administration, others were attracted by the affordable shared floor spaces. However, as soon as the building was deprived of the communal accommodation status, all the essential utility services such as heating, water and natural gas were cut off. The power is currently supplied through the rotten electric wires installed with obvious violation of safety regulations. It seems we can only hope for the grace of God. Even the electrician would come only after a scandal. The low-income multi-child families and lonely old people who live here indeed have very little to offer. These wires carry electric current. We live in constant fear of our lives. The risk of being trapped in rubble has forced the ground and fifth-floor dwellers to move out. Those who stay in the decaying building are practically roofless. We fire furnaces with this kind of matches. We would use anything suitable for starting a fire, including blankets, just to keep our children warm. According to unfortunate dwellers, the building has been in need of a major repair for the last 15 years. Meanwhile, not even general maintenance works were performed during that period. In turn, the local officials promised to create a condominium and do the Capitol building overall on credit terms within the communal services reform. We're planning to perform capital repairs of all the major dormitory building structures, including the water and heating supply systems. In regards to that, we have started the actual count of the building residents. The dwellers, however, seem to be rather concerned with the officials' initiative, as none of them is likely to cope with the contract terms. The overhaul will cost each family around $3,300, which has to be paid in installments of $20 per month. Meanwhile, I have to maintain my family on monthly welfare allowances of only $65. The building's condition has not been classified as critical, which means no prospects for relocation to a new warmer home. However, the decaying house residents still hope for assistance of the new regional administration head.
Wednesday marked 1 year since the arrest of Alga party leader Vladimir Kozlov. Interrogations, searches, investigations, and trials, those were not the simplest of times for the politician and his colleagues. No one harbored any illusions that the verdict would be anything but harsh. The opposition politician must spend 7.5 years behind bars. The next story is about the year in the life of the political prisoner.
On January 23, 2012, the leader of the unregistered party, Alga, Vladimir Kozlov, was arrested by the National Security Committee following the search in the party's offices. 1 year has passed since, and needless to say, it was one of the toughest times for the political opposition. That same day, the Secret Service arrested Igor Vinyavsky, the chief editor of newspaper Vzгляд, and Sirik Sapargali, the activist of the Halyk Maydani movement. Vinyavsky was released 50 days later, whereas Sapargali was kept in the detention center until the court gave him 4 years of suspended sentence. This footage shows Vladimir Kozlov having a conversation with Oilman. The attempt to resolve the labor conflict peacefully backfired for him in the form of criminal charges. After the Zhanozyan tragedy, the opposition leader was accused of inciting social hatred, calling for violent overthrow of the government and organizing a criminal group. During his visits, he called Oilman to stay calm if they wanted to find a solution to the labor issue. He just asked them to voice their economic and legal demands, avoiding violence. He actually helped them to protest using only legal methods. The trial lasted for 2.5 months. After hearing witnesses, experts, defendants and prosecutors, observers and human rights activists came to the conclusion that the process is politically motivated. Many were surprised when the court announced the prison term of 7.5 years. It's absurd that he was convicted for the organization of mass disorders. His fabrication, hence the sentence of 7.5 years, sounds like a provocation. The appeal of the verdict didn't bring any results, but the sentence paved the way for the authorities' increased prosecution against Alga. Searches and confiscation of property followed shortly. Kozlov will not go away, and I believe he will serve less than 7 years in prison. He will be released and continue fighting with our support. I mean, this is an inevitable process which will eventually come to the point when real citizens will outnumber the subjects. For the spouse of Vladimir Kozlov, the start and end of the past year were quite similar. In January 2012, her husband was arrested, whereas in January 2013, her house was searched once again. It was a very difficult year, filled with anxiety, challenges and great disappointments. This year, I have one goal, and it's to help my husband, always be there for him, and try everything possible to release him soon. Vladimir Kozlov is serving his sentence not at the place of residence, but where he supposedly committed the crime.
Meanwhile, in Semey, the convicted Alga party leader's East Kazakhstan colleagues held a campaign in his support.
Vladimir Kozlov, the leader of the banned opposition party Alga, has been under arrest for already a full year. His supporters, other party members and concerned residents of Semey gathered on Wednesday at the downtown park to launch balloons, symbolizing the plea to release Kozlov. It is being exactly a year since the detention of Vladimir Kozlov, the leader of Alga party. We came here to show our sympathy. Our government couldn't accuse him of telling lies, and that's why they slapped him with specifically made-up charges of inciting social hatred.
In other news, new executive directors were appointed in exploration production Kazmunaygas and Ozeymunaygas on Wednesday.
Abat Nursiitov became the CEO of Exploration and Development Kazmunaygas, replacing Alik Aydarbayev, who was appointed as the governor of the Mangistau region a day prior. Ozeymunaygas Corporation also changed its senior managers. Abat Nursiitov, who is already the deputy head of production at Kazmunaygas, became the company's board chair, while Abzal Mindibayev is now the CEO and the board chair of Ozeymunaygas.
New faces were also introduced in the lower chamber of parliament. Olympic champion Olga Shoshigina was presented by the speaker, although the athlete is in no need of a special introduction.
Shoshigina took the parliamentary seat of Daria Klebanova, who resigned from the office under puzzling circumstances in November of 2012. The ex-deputy seems to have been forgotten by the former colleagues, while the new one looked puzzled by the Nuratan Party's decision to register her as a parliament member. The female athlete confessed she needed some time to settle the mind and adjust to the new position. However, she already seems to have an idea for the first deputy query. I believe that the current sport code has been long obsolete. The international requirements keep changing and we should keep up with them.
Staying on the subject, the Kazakh Post published postage stamps on the subject of champions of Kazakhstan. A new batch of 7 stamps were released in circulation. They commemorate the Olympic champions that earned gold medals in the 30th Olympic Games in London. The ceremonial cancellation of stamps took place in Almaty and Astana simultaneously, with the athletes in attendance.
The stamps introduced today are a worthy tribute of the Kazakhstan people to the great sportsmen glorifying the country. From now on, the postage stamps with your portraits on them will be there on all international mailing items. The batch of 30,000 sheets of post stamps with a nominal value of $1 each was manufactured with a 4-color photo offset method. The post office employees are convinced that the sport edition stamps will arouse a great deal of interest among the collectors. On a side note, the new stamps were introduced into postal circulation in Almaty by the female athlete Olga Rybakova, while the Astana event featured the Olympic boxing champion Serik Sapiyev and the 2-time Olympic champion Ilya Ilyin. I'm very proud to see how the Kazakhstan Postal Service strives to maintain the country's image by promoting the Kazakh athletes' achievements. These post stamps will make our names and faces recognizable worldwide.
The body of Berdak Altayev was transported to Kazakhstan from Moscow. The Russian Gubkin Oil and Gas University graduate student fell off his dormitory window this past Sunday. Results of an expert examination have not been released, but several unofficial leads have been voiced, including suicide and murder. This is not the first death of a Kazakh citizen studying in this university.
The room is sealed for the investigation purposes. I can't let you enter the room in the absence of relatives or investigators. The 23-year-old master's degree candidate Berdak Altayev had been occupying the room on the 12th floor of this dormitory for the last 1.5 years. 3 days ago, the Gubkin University student fell out of the window to his death. According to the information we have on file, the incident happened at 10:10 in the evening. Meanwhile, Berdak was a very good, quiet and calm-tempered guy. He had never been admonished by the dorm administration. The representatives of the oil and gas field development faculty the deceased student was enrolled in have not yet started their own investigation. However, the version of racially motivated murder was immediately refuted. He might have accidentally closed the door with the key left outside and attempted to get from one room to another by the window ledge. He must have slipped and lost his balance, which resulted in falling. Meanwhile, the university hallways are rife with rumors about the true reason behind Berdak's death. However, it appears to be too delicate for an open discussion. There's no criminal background or skinheads involvement behind the accidents. Everyone knows what this guy had been up to lately. Are you implying drug addiction? Well, you said it. Meanwhile, 3 Kazakhstan nationals studying in the Gubkin State Oil and Gas University died in Moscow over the last 5 years. In December of 2008, the first-year student Yerlan Aytymov was allegedly slaughtered by a group of skinheads. I think that the only reason behind the oil and gas university involvement with as many as 3 deaths of Kazakhstan students is the institution's great popularity with the Kazakh youth. Over 130 Kazakhstan students are currently studying there. The lawyer Marat Bashimov also studied abroad thanks to the education grant from the Bolashak Center. He insists that safety of Kazakhstan students studying in Russian capital must become a top priority concern for the country's public and government. I know that parents are afraid to send their children to study in Moscow. Statistics show a constant rundown in the number of Kazakhstan students in Russia. The government should expand more efforts towards ensuring safety of the Kazakhstan citizens studying abroad. Meanwhile, Berdak Altayev's body has been delivered to Almaty. The funeral ceremony has been scheduled for Thursday. For now, the deceased students' relatives refuse to comment on the matter or otherwise interact with the media.
The Orthodox Church, headed by Pope Gennady, saw elements of inciting religious discord in Jamila Karimova's article published in the Megapolis newspaper. Although bureaucracy may be to blame for the scandal, the popes were mostly outraged at the caricature of Jesus Christ. More on the limits of admissibility in this report.
A newspaper article with a cartoon is now a major reason for a press conference, with one held on Wednesday by the executive secretary of the Russian Orthodox Church in Kazakhstan. The article in question talks about this year's Christmas celebration in the city's cathedral. On January 7th, churchgoers came to the cathedral, but instead of a mass, they were treated to a mayor's speech after being lined up in front of him. The article noted that officials were allowed to speak from the pulpit as if holding a service, and was also accompanied by a cartoon, which enraged church officers the most. The cartoon went over all possible lines, even in a liberal society. It's completely unacceptable in cultural diverse communities, especially in the 21st century and in such a complex multiracial and multi-religious society. The cartoon caused outrage even among Muslims. The leader of Union of Muslims, which opposes the state in some sense, doesn't share the view of the Russian Orthodox Church. Murat Elibekov believes that in his particular situation, the priests should have acted wiser. I think if they were intelligent and educated people, they would not complain or curse the journalist. On the contrary, they should have thanked him for the constructive comments by accepting their mistakes and, of course, taking into account expressed observations and making appropriate conclusions. Cartoon artist Ibrahim Kubekov believes this was just a way to ignore reality. In any case, the cartoon represented his personal view. It seems to me that they're the ones causing all the fuss. If these people were actually doing what they're supposed to, they wouldn't have gone to such length. For many, Christmas is just a tradition, while some truly believe in God, and it's very important. Art historian Valeria Ibrayeva says she supports the artists, believing the church is making absurd accusations and calling them a campaign against art. In fact, this cartoon is absolutely innocent, and I believe there is no ground for a scandal here, especially in such a multi-religious country. But this is a classic case of finding a scapegoat. The artist just used the familiar settings and characters for the cartoon, that's all. In any case, the publication is not facing any serious claims, since the church believes the public outcry is a punishment enough.
High-ranking officials and judges must learn the word of God and those who preach it. This method is proposed by Astana Center Consulting for the implementation of the Reinforcement of Freedom of Worship in Kazakhstan project. How exactly is it planning to reinforce spirituality remains to be seen. For now, these are some of the questions we attempted to answer in this final story.
The religious project with the slogan "Foster Freedom of Religion in Kazakhstan" was presented in Almaty. Project organizers believe that everyone should have a religious freedom. They also believe it is necessary to control incorrect religious movements. Only re-registration can help eradicate them. When people are given various norms that they can use, this can foster freedom of religion. Public activists decided to foster religious positions with the help of educational courses. The participants of the training will be those who decide for people to which God you can pray and to which you can't. The goal of the training is rather straightforward. We want to raise awareness and enhance the skills of government officials, law enforcement officers and courts officers so that they could ensure people's rights to religious freedom. The end of the presentation was ruined by one of the visitors' notes on plagiarism. He found his works in the book published for the seminar, although under a different author. On the one hand, I am pleased that my intellectual works are so popular. On the other hand, I am displeased with infringements on my copyright. Kazakhstan is a secular state by constitution, and the government pays special attention to tolerance and freedom of religion. Despite all that, last year a notorious law on religion was enacted. During its implementation, the number of religious organizations in the country was cut by a third.
That is all we have time for now. Make sure to subscribe to K Plus on Facebook and Twitter. See you tomorrow.